On a February day in the year AD 638, the Caliph Omar entered Jerusalem, riding upon a white camel. He was dressed in worn, filthy robes, and the army that followed him was rough and unkempt, but its discipline was perfect. At his side was the patriarch Sophronius, as chief magistrate of the surrendered city. Omar rode straight to the site of the Temple of Solomon, whence his friend Muhammad had ascended into heaven. Watching him stand there, the patriarch remembered the words of Christ and murmured through his tears, "Behold the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet." Next, the caliph asked to see the shrines of the Christians. The patriarch took him to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and showed him all that was there. While they were in the church, the hour for Muslim prayer approached. The caliph asked where he could spread out his prayer rug. Sophronius begged him to stay where he was, but Omar went outside to the porch of the Martyrion, for fear, he said, lest his zealous followers might claim for Islam the place wherein he had prayed. And so indeed it was. The porch was taken over by the Muslims, but the church remained as it had been, the holiest sanctuary of Christendom. This was according to the terms of the city's surrender. The Prophet himself had ordained that while the heathen should be offered the choice of conversion or death, the people of the book, the Christians and the Jews, with whom by courtesy he included the Zoroastrians, should be allowed to retain their places of worship and to use them without hindrance, but they might not add to their number, nor might they carry arms nor ride on horseback, and they must pay a special capitation tax known as the jizya. Sophronius could not have hoped for better terms when he rode out on his ass under safe conduct to meet the caliph on the Mount of Olives, refusing to hand over his city to anyone of lesser authority. Jerusalem had been beleaguered for over a year, and the Arabs, inexperienced in siege warfare and ill-equipped for it, were powerless against the newly repaired fortifications. But within the city, provisions had run low, and there was no longer any hope of relief. The countryside was in the hands of the Arabs, and one by one the towns of Syria and Palestine had fallen to them. There was no Christian army left nearer than Egypt, except for the garrison holding out at Caesarea on the coast, protected by the imperial navy. All that Sophronius could obtain from the conqueror, in addition to the usual terms, was that the imperial officials in the city might retire in safety with their families and their portable possessions to the coast at Caesarea. This was the patriarch's last public achievement, the tragic climax to a long life spent in labor for the orthodoxy and unity of Christendom. Ever since the days of his youth, when he had travelled round the monasteries of the East with his friend John Moscus, gathering for their spiritual meadow sayings and stories of the saints, to his later years, when the emperor whose policy he opposed appointed him to the great see of Jerusalem, he had fought steadfastly against the heresies and nascent nationalism that he foresaw would dismember the empire, but the honey-tongued defender of the faith, as he was named, had preached and worked in vain. The Arab conquest was proof of his failure, and a few weeks later he died of a broken heart. Indeed, no human agency could have stopped the Muslims. Throughout the history of the Roman Empire, there had been a latent struggle between East and West. The West had won at Actium, but the East overcame its conquerors. Egypt and Syria were the richest and most populous provinces of the empire. They contained its main centers of industry. Their ships and caravans controlled the trade with the Orient. Their culture, both spiritual and material, was far higher than that of the West, not only because of their long traditions, but also because of the stimulus given by the proximity of Rome's only rival in civilization, the kingdom of Sassanid Persia. Inevitably, the influence of the East grew greater, till at last the Emperor Constantine the Great adopted an Eastern religion and moved his capital eastward to Byzantium on the Bosphorus. In the next century, when the empire, weakened by internal decay, had to face the onrush of the barbarians, the West perished, but the East survived, thanks largely to Constantine's policy. while barbarian kingdoms were established in Gaul, in Spain, in Africa, in distant Britain, and finally in Italy. The Roman Emperor ruled the eastern provinces from Constantinople.